Hey guys, we're going to go ahead and get into the next section of the Kabbalah. If you're new to here, if you're new to this video, basically I'm going through an entire series where we're going to take a deep dive into the Kabbalah as well as the Talmud, which is the Kabbalah being a Jewish esoteric mystical text, while the Talmud is, the Jews claim the Talmud originally started as the oral traditions that Moses kept, not the written down traditions of the Torah rather, but the oral traditions that were later articulated to also encompass the laws and customs and things of the Jews. Well, today there's a lot of flack in the news, a lot of flack in the culture about what exactly are in these texts as they relate to Gentiles and a bunch of other things, even regarding pedophilia and essentially creating a hierarchy, calling Gentiles beasts or animals. But, you know, we're going to get into that later. So before I start with this next section of the introduction into the Kabbalah, which is called the Prince of the Presence, which is, I believe, going to get into Metatron, this angel, this alleged angel that we start to learn about in the AD, after death era of Christ, about 2 centuries after death. Does he really get articulated into the Kabbalistic traditions? But before that, I want to give some attention to some of the comments under the original video from where I started in chapter 1. It looked like there may have been a Jewish boomer or someone that was saying, how dare you try to interpret the Kabbalistic texts, they're esoteric in nature, and you literally can't do this because you're a Gentile, is essentially what he was saying. So I wanted to give reference to this verse from the Talmud, Baba Kama 113a, which says, Jews may use lies to circumvent a Gentile. And also in Libre David 37 from the Talmud, it says, never communicate the Talmud with Gentiles. So for you commenter out there, I'm going to go ahead and read this book, even if you don't want me to, and if you don't want me to see things that are in it. That's the whole reason of this series, guys. So let's get into it. And by the way, guys, when I reference the Talmud, when I reference the Kabbalah with quotations, I'm going to reference them without any bias. I'm going to say it just how it says it in the original Hebrew in the Talmud, okay? So, for example, when I reference Libre David 37, I only said half of that, what it actually says, because the other half is probably not appropriate for YouTube, but it's about Gentiles. So, you know, again, this is the Talmudic doctrine, and that's just how it is. It's a collection of the thoughts of rabbis over time, and that has surely gotten worse. So anyways, let's continue. The Prince of the Presence, which we think is about Metatron. Of the numerous angelic names recorded in the various books of palace literature, the best known was that of Metatron, Prince of the Divine Presence. He was the senior angel in the entire Empyrean constellation. Okay, and this Metatron figure, when I think of Metatron, without any prior knowledge of Kabbalistic literature, I think of his understanding in popular culture. So when I think of Metatron, I think of like the scribe of God, like the scribe of God, or I think of Metatron's cube. I think of the geometrical shapes that have esoteric origins. So let's see if it even gets close to that description in the Kabbalah. He was the senior angel in the entire Empyrean constellation and of a wholly different nature from all his colleagues. For uniquely among the divine beings, Metatron had once been human. Interesting. His earthly name had been Enoch. No way. Is this the Enoch? He is recorded in the book of Genesis as the son of Jared and the father of Methuselah. Interesting. So it is the Enoch. And these Jews believe that he was deified, essentially. Became a lowercase g God when he was raptured into heaven, because Enoch never died. The man famous in the Bible for living longer than anyone else, unlike his father and his son, however, Enoch did not die. The Bible says as much. Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him, which means God literally raptured him up into heaven, flesh and all. This intriguing sentence was enough to spawn dozens of myths and legends about the immortal Enoch. It even gave rise to its own genre of literature. At least 3 books ascribed to, but not actually composed by, Enoch were written between the 2nd century BCE and the 6th CE. The third book, naturally entitled 3 Enoch, is a classic of the palace literature, which again is that literature that is denoted by these Jewish mystics that somehow spiritually traveled to the heavenly realm to gather wisdom that they did not deserve, but basically whatever they could acquire and take back with them, they articulated it into this palace literature, which at the time were manuscripts that were later compiled into the Kabbalah in the medieval period. The angels grumbled when Enoch was brought into heaven and transformed into Metatron. Now, I have to say that sentence alone really stands out to me, because there were rebellions in heaven. The ones that descended upon Mount Hermon, for example, were in rebellion to God when they said, we've come to do a great sin, when the angel Azazel was there, allegedly, and so was... can't think of the one that took total responsibility. But they came to do a great sin, and they all were in agreement, and that's when they slept with human women, creating hybrids, which are denoted as Nephilim in ESV, but giants in KJV. So they were punished. They were sent to hell, and Enoch was basically speaking on their behalf as a messenger between them and God. So to say that the angels that are in heavenly places now were grumbling that Enoch was basically put in a higher position than them, it says the angels grumbled when Enoch was brought into heaven and transformed into Metatron. Angels were originally made, and angels were a bit of a failure in some ways, because since they were perfect beings, they never knew suffering. This is the reason you have the person, the angel Lucifer, Satan. He rebelled in heavenly places because he had such an ego, he didn't know suffering. He said, why can't I become God? Why do you have to be God, right? That's the original rebellion. That happened because he was a perfect being that was never humbled, never knew suffering. Part of our suffering is a very important tool on this earth while we're here. It makes us who we are. It allows us to truly appreciate God and choose to love him through free will. But to say that these angels in heaven grumbled is to say that these angels in heaven were jealous. And that sentence just really stands out to me, because that's truly a limitation. That's trembling upon the limitation that sent many angels to hell. But anyways, it goes on to say, according to 3 Enoch, Metatron himself told Rabbi Ishmael that Prince Enoch had been sent to fetch him from the midst of humanity, when he was still 3,650 million parasangs, which must be a unit of measurement for distance, away from heaven, about 10 million miles. The heavenly being smelled with odur, which odor, spelled O-D-O-U-R. What is that? What is the smell of one born of woman? They demanded. Why does a white drop ascend on high and serve amongst those who cleave among the flames? That's some cool literature describing the ego of angels, apparently. God pacified the rebellion. Do not be displeased at this, he commanded, for all mankind has rejected me and my great kingdom and gone off and worshipped idols. This one whom I have removed from them is the choicest of them all. This one whom I have taken is my sole reward for my whole world under heaven. So, you know, the realm at which God raptured Enoch from, you know, actual history of Enoch being raptured, this is the antediluvian period. This is before the flood, before Noah even, okay? You can look at the 10 descendants of family members up until Noah. There were 10 generations, and at this time, these people lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it goes on to say, Metatron's role in heaven was to act as an intermediary between God and humanity, just as he was an intermediary between the fallen angels and God in the book of Enoch, just as Catholics or Orthodox use saints as intermediaries during prayer. There's a Protestant misconception about the worship of Mother Mary or the worship of the saints, when in reality they are intermediaries for God. Just as you would pray for a family member or pray for a friend, you, in that case, become an intermediary for them on behalf of their own salvation or on behalf of their own sins or struggles that they are going through. In the simplest version of this belief, the universe was created by a supreme God who then handed over one executive control to a minor deity. Oh my God. Yeah, I figured that was weird when the word God was lowercase g. They think there's a whole system of deities that, at least that's how I'm perceiving it, right? This is anecdotal. Some dualists believe that the minor deity had actually seized power from the supreme God and used it to introduce evil into the world. You know what that sounds like to me, guys? That sounds like Satan is apparently the true God here, according to the Kabbalists. Listen to this carefully, because I've heard this before, but this might be where it's being articulated in the Kabbalah. Some dualists believe that the minor deity had actually seized power from the supreme God and used it to introduce evil into the world. These dualists, whom we call Gnostics, saw their task as gaining the mystical knowledge, or gnosis, that would defeat the lesser God and restore the supreme being to his preeminent status. Some scholars, notably Gershom Scholem, the outstanding 20th century pioneer of Kabbalah studies, sounds like Golem. Scholem suggested a close connection between Gnosticism and ancient Jewish mysticism. Of course, the dualist influence shows itself clearly in the passage from Hekalat Rabbati. And just to be very clear here, not all Jews are Talmudic or Kabbalah-oriented. There's two particular groups today, rabbinic Judaism, and rabbinic Judaism is the majority of Judaism, which incorporates the Talmud and the Kabbalah, but in varying degrees, because there's different Jewish sects that use the Kabbalah and Talmud in their own degree of worship, reverence, and historical recognition, while there was another group called the Karaite Jews, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Karaites emerged out of the medieval era, and they particularly were Jews that only wanted to be traditional in the sense of only looking at the written law, the Torah. So they reject the Talmud because interpretations and legal rulings should be based solely on the written text of Torah. In other words, the words of man and the continual wisdoms as they are put in the Talmud should not be administered or used over the original words that Moses wrote down in the Torah. So, it's really a shame that the Karaite Jews didn't recognize their Messiah in the first place, because truly they seem to be adhering to the original traditions with the law of Moses, because they don't they don't recognize the Talmud and Kabbalah. And they're still around to this day. They came about in the medieval period, just after, really in response to the introduction of the Kabbalah from all of those manuscripts that were put together there. So yeah, guys, I hope you gained some information there, a lot of stuff to think about. But yeah, remember to like and subscribe, and see ya.